Okay, let's jump right in. In this explainer, we are diving straight into the heart of what is literally one of the most chilling, bizarre, and just flat-out baffling mysteries of the entire 20th century. We're talking about the Dyatlov Pass Incident, a case from way back in 1959 that, believe it or not, still completely haunts investigators, scientists, and historians today. Picture this, you've got 9 highly experienced hikers. They venture out into the freezing, pitch-black Soviet wilderness of 1959, and they never return. Their destination? A peak that the indigenous Mansi people ominously called Holat Siakal, and the translation for that? The Mountain of the Dead. I mean, you really couldn't set a darker stage for an expedition that ended in absolute, unexplained terror.
Part 1. The Mountain of the Dead. Now, looking at how this all unfolded, I want to make one thing absolutely perfectly clear right off the bat. These were not amateurs making rookie mistakes. Led by a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov, this was a thoroughly documented, super confident expedition. Everything was going exactly to plan from late January right up until February 1st. That's when they made the somewhat unusual choice to set up camp on an exposed mountain slope. And then, just silence. Days pass. Their expected check-in message never arrives, and weeks later, search teams are finally dispatched.
It's so important to remember that these hikers were seasoned survivalists. They were totally prepared for extreme conditions. They were carrying cameras, writing in journals. In fact, if you look at the surviving photographs, you just see smiling faces, friends laughing, totally embracing the challenge of the wilderness. They were confident, highly capable, and fully equipped, which honestly makes what happens next utterly incomprehensible.
Part 2. A chilling discovery.
So, search teams finally arrive at the campsite, and the mystery instantly turns into sheer horror. They find the tent partially buried, and it looks like it was abandoned in a sudden, desperate panic. All their food, personal belongings, and, crucially, their heavy winter boots were left completely untouched. But here's the detail that changes absolutely everything. The tent was slashed open from the inside. Just think about that. What could possibly force seasoned survivalists to literally destroy their only shelter and run out into a raging blizzard without their boots?
The tracks descending from that campsite paint a picture of absolute terror. Investigators found footprints leading nearly a full mile away toward a nearby forest. But again, these weren't heavy boot prints. The group was fleeing barefoot, in just their socks, or wearing minimal clothing. They were running directly into -30-degree temperatures, cold enough to kill a human being in minutes.
It took weeks, but the first 2 bodies were finally discovered under a massive cedar tree near the edge of the forest. They were surrounded by burnt branches, which tells us they desperately tried to build a fire to survive the freezing darkness. Without proper gear, extreme exposure inevitably claimed them through severe hypothermia. For those 2, the cause of death was fairly straightforward. But for the rest of the group, the mystery was really only just beginning.
Part 3. The unexplained injuries.
When the snow finally melted months later, search teams found the rest of the missing hikers. And the autopsy reports, they completely defy logic. On one hand, several bodies sustained massive internal trauma. We're talking broken ribs, crushed chests, severe skull fractures. The medical examiner said the blunt force was comparable to a high-speed car crash. Yet, they had virtually zero external bruising or cuts. No signs of a physical attack, no explosion. How does a human body absorb that kind of crushing force without a single scratch on the surface?
And as if the immense internal trauma wasn't baffling enough, the autopsies revealed some hyper-specific, genuinely gruesome details. One victim was missing her tongue, another was missing parts of their eyes. You can imagine how details like this immediately fueled decades of wild speculation. Were there animal attacks? Or did they encounter something completely unexplainable out there in the dark?
So how did the authorities handle all this evidence? Well, the Soviet government launched an investigation, but then they ultimately just classified the case files. They abruptly shut down the whole inquiry, officially blaming the deaths on a compelling natural force. I mean, what does that even mean? It provided absolutely no real answers to the grieving families, and honestly, it only poured gasoline on the rumors spreading among the public.
Part 4. Decades of theories.
Because that official explanation fell so incredibly short, 2 dominant historical theories emerged over the years. The first is a deadly avalanche, which, sure, makes sense contextually, right? The tent was pitched on an exposed, snowy slope. The second is a secret Cold War weapons test, which was actually supported by witnesses who reported seeing strange, glowing orange objects in the sky.
But here's the catch. Both theories have glaring physical inconsistencies. The slope actually wasn't steep enough for a major avalanche, and the tent was found relatively intact. As for military testing, there was zero direct physical evidence of any weapons at the scene.
Now here's another totally fascinating scientific explanation to consider: infrasound. This involves low-frequency sound waves created by strong winds moving around specific mountain formations. While you can't consciously hear it, infrasound can actually trigger severe panic, anxiety, and utterly irrational behavior in humans. This theory basically suggests the unique wind patterns of the mountain literally drove the hikers into a state of uncontrollable terror, compelling them to blindly slash their way out of the tent. It's a wild thought, isn't it?
Part 5. The 2020 Investigation.
Okay, let's fast forward all the way to modern times. Armed with advanced science and computer modeling, Russian investigators officially reopened this famous cold case. And in 2020, they came to a conclusion. They stated that shifting snow, specifically what they called an avalanche-like snowslide event, was the cause. They determined that a block of hard snow likely placed immense, sudden pressure on the tent, forcing a frantic escape. And once they were out in that freezing darkness, the separated group couldn't safely return, and they perished.
But despite this modern official ruling, critics immediately pointed to lingering inconsistencies. They argue that a simple snow slab just does not account for the sheer strangeness of the tragedy. I mean, why were the internal injuries to some victims equivalent to a high-speed car crash? Why did they travel nearly a full mile away in those conditions? It feels like every single time we think we have an answer, the physical evidence forces us to question it all over again.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're really left with this massive, haunting question. Will the frozen darkness of the Ural Mountains ever reveal the complete truth of the Dyatlov Pass Incident? We kind of have to wonder if the harsh snow has permanently erased those final clues, or if the full, terrifying truth of what drove 9 experts into a deadly blizzard is still out there, just waiting to be uncovered.